Blended Podcasts. Brought to you by Blended Audio.
Hello and welcome back to Talos Talks Shit. This is our final episode in our 8-episode intro series. This is the final episode on the technicalities of AI, the fundamentals of AI, and the position of AI currently in 2019. So up until this point, we have explained from the concept of intelligence existing outside of the human, Talos, the first autonomous man, all the way into the first computers and the first understandings of logic-based computation, how to break the world down into logic systems and algorithms for computers to understand. I apologize for not introducing Puppy yet, who's nodding along on the side over here.
I'm just like, hi.
Yeah, man, what's up? So now we went into computational understanding of logic and functions in terms of breaking down the world for ways for computers to understand. And then most recently, we sort of tracked the rise of machine learning and neural networks, specifically neural networks as more human and more intelligent ways of interpreting data and ways for machines to become agents. So this is a major thing for artificial general intelligence. So it's important to define, I think, at this point that you have AI and you have AGI. AI is not what anyone is scared about. AGI is what everyone's scared about. So what AGI means, it stands for, is artificial general intelligence, and that general or that G factor is quite important.
The gangster factor.
The gangster factor, dude. The NAS algorithm and the fucking gangster factor. It's important because that general factor is really where the magic is. That general factor is really what allows us to look at a cup, but then also understand that that cup might belong to someone. Perhaps that cup has a sentimental value. Perhaps that sentimental value is tied to past experiences, and so on and so on and so on as these deep trees of human understanding go.
And just to, I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but there's a researcher called, I think it was someone Spearman, and he did a bunch of really famous psychological studies back in the 90s. And he found that across a wide range of goals that people tried to obtain, and a wide range of fields of people he was looking, whether people were successful in their fields, he found that there was some common latent factor. He called it the G factor, in fact, that was very highly correlated with being high performing at certain cognitive tasks. So this concept of general intelligence, which is a sort of type of intelligence that is able to perform well under a wide range of different scenarios and circumstances, is a really important idea.
I think that the really important thing is not necessarily the wide scope, but more unexpected scenarios. Because we can still program a system with the widest scope, and that really won't be generally intelligent, you know? So it's this ability to deal with unexpected scenarios that is really captivating AI research at the moment. And one of the core ways that they're exploring this is through games. Video games and board games and stuff. And the reason that they are using games is because, as I said in the previous episode, they're these sort of nicely packaged situations, you know? So it is extended logic and general intelligence to a perfectly defined parameter point. You know, that parameter point is just what you can do in a video game or a board game, right? And really, that's like when you have a baby and you set up like a little nursery with those little kiddie gate thingies you get when you child-proof your house, you know? And when you put your baby in that nursery and you step out, there's all these blocks and Legos and whatever, and that baby can essentially do whatever it likes within the parameters of your little enclosure you've set up for it. And in doing those things in that enclosure, that baby learns how to build Legos, how to fit circles into circular holes, so on and so forth. Becomes quite a bit more complicated with games though, because games have situations that can vary. So to build this up from sort of the basics of machine learning, you get two types of games. You get pure logic games and non-pure logic games. So a pure logic game would be something like chess, where moves follow logically on based on the previous move. You know, there's a few Hail Marys here and there. But
there's some games that like involve chance, but mostly,
Yeah, and even that chance in our understanding of logic and machines and whatever it's a very low percentage of chance happening in a game of chess. But to have a generally intelligent system, it has to be able to do better and do more. So the more complex games these systems are starting to play, the closer they're becoming to being generally intelligent. And really where this all started was with a company called DeepMind and their program AlphaGo, which Go is a Chinese game. Chinese board game. You probably know a little bit more about it than me.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful game. I'm really bad at it. But yeah, just to like also talk about that. So what makes games really attractive, especially for AI research, is that they're a really sterile environment, right? Because we always, when we think about a good strategic game, it kind of brings out some of like the characteristics that we expect an intelligent agent to have, right? To be able to plan, to have a goal, which is obviously winning the game, and able to make instrumental improvements to itself, starting at some point and being bad and getting better over time. But also with games, they're very cheap. It's very easy to simulate 1 billion games of chess.
Right.
So that's what makes games really the kind of sweet spot for AI research right now. It's a very easily simulatable process that requires certain characteristics that we associate with intelligence.
Right, so let's break down Go. So Go is more complicated than chess. Why?
So let's just start with what Go is. So Go is a very elegant board game, and it's, so imagine a 3x3 grid. A 3x3 grid. And how Go works is that the white player and the black player, they have these stones. And you place the stones on the intersections of the lines of your 3x3 grid, right? So, for example, you could play a stone in the corner, or you could play it anywhere inside the board where 2 lines cross. And the goal of the game, very vaguely put, is to capture as much territory as possible, right? So to
dominate the board.
Yeah, to dominate the board. So for either with the black pieces or the white pieces. So, but it's that when the game ends, you have more territory than your opponent.
And presumably your opponent is trying to block your advances by placing their pieces.
And do the same as well, trying to get your...
Right.
And what's fascinating about Go is that, so I said a 3x3 grid, but I think it's usually played on like a 64x64 grid or something, but it's quite big. And so in chess, you play inside the squares and you have 8 squares, right? So you could imagine on your first move for chess, you could move any of the pawns in the front or your 2 knights, right? So in your first move, you have 10 possible moves, right? And then afterwards, you can move, and you have like another possibly 10 moves, right? So you can either move the pawn again, or you can move your other knight. So this is called the branching factor of chess, and it's basically the number of moves or the number of possible games after each move, right? So you could imagine two different board positions after 2 moves, but then you could also imagine 2 wholly different games after 50 moves, after like 100 moves.
Right.
And chess has quite a big branching factor. I might be wrong, but I think it's something like 10 to the 20. So it's 10 multiplied by itself roughly
20 times.
20 times.
That's a big number for anyone who doesn't know maths. That's
It's
way over a billion.
Sure. And Go, although it's a simpler game, so you don't have pieces like rooks and pawns, you only have stones, and you only like put them on the table. Its branching factor is way bigger. It's like 10 to the 80 or something. It's a very complicated game.
Almost unfathomable number, 10 to the 80.
And what that means is that you can't brute force it.
Right. Okay. So that's a very important point in AI evolution to define. Is that let's say I may be wrong exactly with the year, but like 2011, AI researchers did not think it was possible to beat Go.
Yeah. So Go was kind of seen as like the holy grail.
Exactly.
And it's actually interesting. I've read a couple of articles on this, and if you ask a Go player, why did you make this move, right? So for example, if you ask like a chess player, sometimes they have intuition, but the intuition's like based with like a lot of like, so it'd be like, oh, the pawn structure there seemed weak, and I saw that the king was on the queen side, and that's where the weak pawn structure was, so I decided to attack it or something. In Go, it's much more like vague and abstract. There'll be like the flow of the board was in this position, or was flowing this way, or it's just very intuition based.
Yeah, they're making a lot more intuitive decisions.
But these are grandmasters, right?
Yeah. They've got a lot of logic behind them, but
it's more very intuitive.
Got you, yeah.
So it made Go a very good game for AI researchers to try to tackle. And DeepMind finally cracked it. I think, was it 2016, 2017?
Yeah, no, it wasn't long ago at all. It was 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, and what they did is they used a combination of supervised learning, right? And in the beginning, to teach the algorithm how to play Go, they downloaded thousands of games of strong amateur Go players' positions, right? And what they do, they would show the algorithm, they'd be like, in this position, guess what the next move is going to be? And the algorithm would try guess what the next move was, and they'd be like, nope, he actually moved there. And so that was like,
so it was very supervised.
Yeah, so it was very supervised. But then they did something clever, because what you need to realize about AI is that your algorithm will perform only as good as the data that you give it, right? So you can't expect world championship level playing algorithms if you give it strong amateur data. So they needed a way to improve this algorithm after it had basically reached strong amateur level. And that's where reinforcement learning and self-play comes in. What they did is that they took this Go algorithm and they made 2 copies of it, 2 exact copies, right? And they made them play against each other. And as soon as one algorithm was slightly better than the other one, I think was as soon as one of the 2 beat the other one more than 55% of the time, they took the winner of that, scrapped the old one, copied the new one, and did the same process.
So now what I want to ask is, when AlphaGo beat, what's his name?
Lee Sedol.
Yeah. Was that a self-play?
Yeah, so it was...
So AlphaGo... the first AlphaGo that beat Lee Sedol, who is the world's best Go player.
I think he's second now, but he's kind of referred to as the Roger Federer of Go.
Okay,
he's not always the top, but like
he's good enough.
Yeah, that's an understatement. Yeah.
So basically, the algorithm that beat him was a supervised algorithm.
Started off as supervised.
Okay, so it started as supervised, and then they introduced self-play. So they got up to a strong amateur level with supervised learning, and then they made it play against itself. Again, as we said, with the generator and discriminator in GANs, they
didn't use guns.
No. But what I'm trying to say is that each time it played against itself, it was highlighting its own weaknesses.
Sure. Sure.
Because it's the same algorithm. It kept, it's the one on the left starts to learn deficiencies about the one on the right. The one on the right tries to fix itself, and then vice versa.
So, almost there, but slightly different. So, if the one on the left found out deficiencies of one on the right, it will exploit them ruthlessly.
Okay.
Right? Until it won more than 55% of the games.
And then they
trash the old one. And then now you have these two ones that don't have that same vulnerability. And then you just keep improving like that.
Yeah, right. And they got it to the point where they had this game with the world champ at the time, and this AI performed a move.
Yeah, well, there were actually two famous moves. So, yeah. So it was a 5 series game. And I think Lee Sedol went into that thinking that there's no way that it would beat him.
Yeah.
And I don't know what game it was, but I remember it was move 37. And so it was quite early in the game. And AlphaGo made this move. And at first, everyone was confused. Everyone was like, what is this move? The commentators thought it was a mistake.
Right, yeah, so did Lee Sedol.
Yeah,
they thought it was a mistake.
Yeah, in fact, Lee Sedol left and went outside for a smoke.
Yeah, because this is important, because when it happened the same when Garry Kasparov was playing Deep Blue, and he said, there's a point in the game where he could feel some other sort of reasoning taking place.
Yeah.
Right. That was so basic compared to what was happening in AlphaGo.
Yeah.
So it's, again, this important point of Lee Sedol and the engineers and the commentators, everyone really expected the AlphaGo algorithm to behave in a certain
way.
Logical way.
Well, not logical, right? So,
logical in terms of
our current knowledge of how the game works.
Exactly, like a logical move based on its data set.
Yeah, based off,
which it didn't do.
No, and I think I need to remember the facts properly, but it had calculated that the probability that a human would make a move like that was something in 1 in 10,000.
Sure. Okay.
And it was a really beautiful move. And so Lee Sedol came back and the game continued. And only further down the line did it turn out that move was crucial in AlphaGo winning that game.
And that's what beat him.
That's what beat him, right?
And that move.
Yeah.
But then it's also important to note that Lee Sedol is a pretty smart guy.
Yeah, and in fact, he beat the machine. So it wasn't 5-0, it was 4-1. And Lee Sedol also made a move that AlphaGo thought the probability a human would make a move like that was vanishingly small.
Right.
And in fact, it was really interesting because Lee Sedol made that move, it messed up the rest of the calculations for AlphaGo. Because AlphaGo had obviously seen all these human games and estimated the probability of Lee Sedol making this move being so small that it messed up all its further estimates for how the game was going to carry out.
Right, so, Lee Sedol, he exploited a weakness similar to a self-play network and an adversarial network. Lee Sedol saw a weakness and he exploited it.
Yeah, I wouldn't say he knew it was a weakness. I just think it was like a moment of human greatness.
Okay,
yeah,
okay, that was very interesting.
Yeah, it was just Lee Sedol kind of transcending...
Taking one for the team for one of the last times.
It was
in
really.
human history.
I think the move's called God's Touch or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a famous move now.
Casual name.
Yeah.
So now, AlphaGo beating Lee Sedol 4-1 was amazing.
Sure.
But the folks at DeepMind thought it wasn't amazing enough.
Yeah. So the one problem with AlphaGo is that no matter how good it was a strong house built on a shaky foundation.
And this is very important for AGI as a concept, is that no matter how capable a general intelligence is of absorbing information, it's still absorbing information from the human sphere, ultimately.
And humans make mistakes.
Humans make mistakes. We don't understand certain things.
Yeah.
And to digress on a small tangent, if super intelligence were to again download all the information in human history, what if we're wrong about the fundamental natures of like quantum mechanics or something, and it downloads that incorrect information? You know?
So it all depends on how it's learning, right? If it's somehow able to verify that our findings are optimal in some sense. So say, for example, it's like, well, yeah, I agree. This is the optimal theory for quantum mechanics. Then it would agree. But if somehow you were able to be like, nah, something doesn't seem right here, I'm going to ignore this axiom or ignore this theorem and maybe put on extra assumptions, it might come up with a better theory. But
to get to that point, it has to be capable of extrapolating its own data, and this is where AlphaZero comes in.
Sure.
In that they took AlphaGo, and so what did they do? They took AlphaGo, and then they took an algorithm that had never had any human interaction.
Yeah, so just to go back to the branching factor of Go, because it's a very important thing. So they're huge. So so think about the Go table, right? And imagine each possible move as a branch of a tree.
Right.
And then imagine each second move as a branch of that tree.
Right.
So you can imagine this huge exponential tree just growing out with all these branches of different potential games. Now, most of those games, especially in the beginning, are trash, right? They you'll lose. And you need some way to follow the right branches in the tree to get to good games, right? And how AlphaGo solved this problem in the beginning, right? In those early parts of the branching factor of the games was that it just copied strong amateurs, right? And then further on, then it made its own strong moves.
Right.
What the DeepMind team realized is that we can just come up with a more principled search technique, right? And it was called the Monte Carlo tree search, right?
Okay.
And what Monte Carlo tree search is, it's just a way of searching many possibilities in a principled way to find the branches of those possibilities that yield good results, right?
Okay.
So then what they did is that they scrapped all human data. They basically used the same technique of self-play from the beginning, right?
Okay, so this started as a blank slate.
Tabula rasa, that's the name for it.
Tabula rasa, yeah.
And with the combination of, so they're called value actor critic methods and value approximation methods, but they're basically methods of taking in a board position and saying how good that board position is. So that's the one tool that they use, and that comes from reinforcement learning. And then they use Monte Carlo tree search, which is a way of looking forward into the future and seeing how good your decisions in the future will be for planning, right? So in the same way in chess, you think one or two moves ahead. It was able to use this technique to look into the future, and using the ability to value how good a board position is, was the ability to look into the future and look how good several positions in the future will be. It was able to ignore all human knowledge and just play against itself.
Yeah, and was able to play against itself so effectively that it ended up beating AlphaGo how many hundreds of millions of times?
Yeah, so it's pretty terrifying. So to give you an idea, I think that AlphaGo beat the current best Go software 100-0 or something, and it obviously lost 4-1 to Lee Sedol, who's the best human chess player, and AlphaZero beat AlphaGo 100-0.
So there's no chance we have a chance against AlphaZero.
And what's most terrifying about that, if you think about how humanity gathers knowledge, right? So every generation we have a bunch of humans, right? And they'll choose to do a certain task. And maybe one of the tasks is learning how to play Go very well. And we'll learn from our predecessors. And the top of the top will learn from the top of the previous generation. And they might make some innovations and they'll get to the top, right? And then the process carries on again. Then a new generation comes. And that's what I think we've been playing Go for hundreds of years. Right?
Yeah, this is the thing that people don't realize. When we say that AlphaZero beat AlphaGo 100 times to 1 and AlphaGo beat Lee Sedol 4 times to 1, what that actually means is that AlphaZero got as much knowledge in that humanity has collected in its entire history of Go playing.
And it did it in 4 hours.
And Jesus Christ.
Did it in 4 hours.
I thought it at least took a day, but
No.
that's wild.
And what was interesting about that algorithm is that it was general purpose. So you could
Okay.
use it. It did pretty well. I think there's no kind of like argument now that the same algorithm, this Alpha Zero, learned how to play chess, and it's better than Stockfish, which
Right,
is the strongest chess programming algorithm in the world.
Right.
And, yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible. That's really incredible. And what's most amazing is that, as always, we're not even really into the meat and potatoes of this yet.
Yeah.
Because after AlphaGo, they decided to tackle even more complex games, such as StarCraft, and a different company called OpenAI decided to tackle Dota.
Mm-hmm.
And to find out why those two games are important and why it's a leap forward for those two games to have been tackled and to have been beat, please tune into our bonus episode this month, where we will finally tackle the agents of AGI. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Pubby. Thank you, Blended Audio and Blended Podcasts, for hosting us. And thank you, Alex, for doing your thing. We'll see you guys soon.